Lena Carter stood in front of the elevator doors on the 24th floor of Storm Point Technologies, trying to calm the tremble in her fingers. The chrome walls around her reflected a version of herself she almost didn't recognize. Tailored blazer, perfectly ironed blouse, a calm face concealing the storm within. She had rehearsed for this interview 100 times in her head. Envisioned every question, every answer. But no scenario had prepared her for what she saw when those doors first opened. There, sitting at the center of the interview panel, was her sister, Seraphine Carter. Same sleek dark hair pulled into a severe chignon. Same perfectly pressed suit in a shade of navy Lena used to borrow when she had a job interview of her own. Her expression was unreadable, her eyes sharp and cool as steel behind thin glasses. She didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge Lena's presence in the slightest. Just flipped through the resume in front of her with surgical precision, as if she were browsing a stranger's report, not her sister's. For a full second, Lena thought she was hallucinating. It had been 7 years. 7 years since their last real conversation, since Lena had found her access revoked from the Storm Point server one day without warning. 7 years since her code, her contributions to a landmark internal security project, were quietly scrubbed clean and replaced with new names. One name, Seraphine's. Lena had never found proof, only suspicion and pain. The betrayal had derailed her career. She'd been a rising systems engineer, working remotely for Storm Point's East Coast division, building up trust visibility, until suddenly her project disappeared from her dashboard, and a week later she received a generic contract termination notice. No explanation, no response to her queries. Her access was cut off, recommendations went dark, and Seraphine stopped answering her calls. And now, here she was, sitting at the head of the panel. Lena's feet were moving before her brain caught up. She stepped forward, offered a hand to the other panelists. 3 men and 1 woman, all middle management, by the looks of their name tags. She smiled, a calm and measured one, hiding the way her heart was hammering in her chest. No one introduced Seraphine, no one needed to. Her presence loomed silent and dominant. The interview began. "Tell us about a time you had to manage a systems breach under pressure," one of the managers asked. Lena answered clearly, confidently. It was her favorite story to tell, an incident involving a late-night intrusion attempt into a non-profit server she was maintaining on a freelance basis, how she had traced the vulnerability to an API update, patched the hole, and implemented a layered defense system by sunrise. The story usually impressed, but this panel barely reacted. No nods, no follow-up. One of them even stifled a yawn. Next question. Another dry one. How do you approach code reviews when collaborating across departments? Lena kept her composure. She answered each question with calm precision, referencing her years of experience, the freelance projects she'd juggled, the open-source repositories. She maintained the independent credentials and certifications she'd earned without institutional backing. She expected curiosity. Instead, she got disinterest, and then she saw it. From the corner of her eye, Seraphine lifted her pen. A fountain pen Lena recognized, and scrawled 1 word in capital red letters across Lena's resume, unqualified. She did it slowly, deliberately, then passed the paper to the man beside her. Lena's chest constricted. It wasn't just that 1 word. It was what followed. No more questions, no thanks for coming. Just polite nods and dismissals, eyes that passed over her like glass. The coldest silence she had ever known. When she finally stood gathering her papers, the man closest to her offered a forced smile. "Thank you, Miss Carter. We'll be in touch." They wouldn't. She turned toward the door, her spine straight, but every muscle screaming. Seraphine didn't even look at her. Outside, the air felt sharper, the sun harsher. Lena walked until her legs burned, until the glass towers of Storm Point were behind her, until the world stopped spinning in her head. She ducked into a corner cafe, the kind with warm lights and the soft hum of lo-fi jazz, ordered a black coffee and settled into a booth with her laptop. The screen glowed to life. Her fingers hovered for a moment before opening a folder titled Proof. Inside were files she had kept for years, even when she told herself it wasn't worth the pain. Emails forwarded from a shared inbox, metadata logs from the source code she had written. Code that later appeared in Seraphine's portfolio. Screenshots of Slack conversations that abruptly vanished after her dismissal. Photos of whiteboard sketches with her handwriting and initials taken during Zoom sessions. She had always suspected Seraphine had orchestrated her removal, but she'd had no one to show it to. No one who would listen until now. The coffee cooled beside her as she clicked through file after file. Her breath slowed. Her anger strangely did not spike it. Simmered slow and steady like coals under a flame. She didn't want revenge. She wanted clarity. Her phone buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it until the preview message blinked on screen. "Hey, I heard something strange today. About your interview. Can we talk?" Nathan Brennan. She knew the name. Everyone in tech did CTO of Stormpoint Visionary. Brilliant always, one step ahead of the market. And engaged to Seraphine for nearly 2 years, Lena had never met him. Only seen his photos online, mostly beside her sister at award galas and corporate panels. Why was he texting her? Her fingers hovered. The message sat on the screen like a trap or an opening. 100 thoughts raced. Had he overheard something? Had someone from the panel spoken up? Had he seen the red ink? She closed her laptop gently, then picked up her phone. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark screen. She no longer looked like the girl who once begged for a second chance. She looked like someone ready to rewrite the entire story. Lena Carter stood up, slipped the laptop into her bag, and walked out of the cafe without answering the message. But she would soon. And when she did, it would not be to ask for a job. It would be to ask a question that had waited 7 years. Why did you let her erase me? And did you know I was never gone? The sun had barely begun to rise when Lena Carter opened her eyes to a slant of light cutting across the narrow living room. The couch beneath her creaked as she shifted, body sore from sleeping in a tight curl. Her friend Maya had offered her the guest bed, but Lena hadn't made it that far. She had dropped onto the couch after midnight and fallen asleep staring at the manila folder on the coffee table. The one with her resume now marred by a thick red line and the single word, unqualified. The word didn't just live on the paper. It lived under her skin. She reached for the folder, flipping it open, like maybe it would say something different today. But the red ink bled as vividly as ever. Her stomach twisted, not because of the insult. She could survive insult. It was the silence that followed. The dismissal, the calculated way Seraphine had erased her with the stroke of a pen. Coffee, she needed coffee. By the time she opened Maya's laptop and checked her inbox, the first notifications were already trickling in. Subject lines like, "Heard something about so, and are you okay?" peppered her screen. At first, Lena thought it might be people reaching out with sympathy. But her pulse quickened when she saw the link in the third email, a blog post on an anonymous industry forum trending. Stormpoint interview, disrupted by insider candidate with conflict of interest. Her throat dried. The post was vague enough to avoid legal implications, but specific enough that anyone who had ever worked with her would know. It described an unnamed candidate with family ties to an executive who became hostile during an internal interview process. There was no name. But the context was unmistakable. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, unsure if she wanted to keep reading. Then came the texts from an old colleague at a previous startup. "Hey, Lena saw something weird this morning. That wasn't about you, was it?" From a former classmate. "Are you the person in that Stormpoint post? Yikes." And finally from her ex-boss. "I really hope it's not true. You've always been sharp, but this looks bad." She slammed the laptop shut. A sharp knock came from the hallway. Maya poked her head in, hair still in a bun, holding out a mug. "You didn't sleep much. Figured you needed this." Lena took the coffee silently. The warmth helped, but the ache in her chest remained. "It's out," she said flatly. "They made sure it got out." Maya didn't ask who they were. She had seen the resume. She knew what Lena had told her the night before. "The Post didn't name you," Maya offered. "You could still walk away, not let them drag you into it." "They already did. I'm not hiding anymore." By noon, Lena had pulled the proof folder onto a flash drive. She sat at the dining table with her laptop open and a Word doc slowly filling with timestamps, links, and annotated screenshots. Email chains showing early drafts of project specs. In her name later appearing under Seraphine's login, diagrams of a whiteboard she had snapped during a late-night brainstorm. The same diagram later reappearing in a company-wide proposal credited to Seraphine Slack Export's metadata. This time, Lena wasn't looking for justice. She was looking for exposure. The email she composed was short. Subject: documentation of internal misconduct. To HR@stormpoint.com, PR@stormpoint.com, and Brennick, Stormpoint. Body attached. You'll find evidence relating to misconduct during the recent Stormpoint candidate review process, including falsification of authorship and suppression of internal collaboration. I am not seeking redress. I am requesting transparency. LC. She hit send. There was no satisfaction, no sense of power. There was only stillness. She walked outside, let the wind slap against her cheeks. Phone turned to silent in her jacket pocket. Hours passed. She didn't expect a response, but one came. A single text from a number she had saved after that brief message the night before. Nathan Brannick. "Come back tomorrow. I want you to sit in on something." No sign-off, no emoji, no explanation. Lena stared at the screen. She read it 3 times. Not because she didn't understand, but because she did. And because for the first time in 7 years, someone inside Stormpoint had decided to break the silence. She placed the phone on the table, the red-inked resume still lying beside it. Then slowly, she turned it over. Tomorrow everything might change. And this time she wouldn't flinch. Lena stepped into the boardroom of Stormpoint with a spine forged in fire. The room was sleek and cold, floor-to-ceiling glass windows pouring daylight across a long obsidian conference table. Around it sat a dozen high-ranking executives, each one dressed in power and silence. No one offered her a smile. No one nodded. But no one told her to leave. At the far end of the table sat Seraphine, her sister, her saboteur. Seraphine's manicured fingers gripped a porcelain coffee cup so tightly that her knuckles blanched white. Her expression was polished, neutrality, but her eyes flickered just for a second when they met Lena's. Nathan Brannick, Stormpoint's CTO, broke the tension. "Lena Carter will be sitting in as an observer today, by my invitation." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. A few of the board members shifted in their seats. The room adjusted like a spine reacting to a foreign implant. Lena took the empty seat at the far right corner, far enough to feel like an outsider, close enough to witness everything. Her hands were steady as she opened her leather satchel and pulled out a single silver USB. No logos, no markings, just memory and evidence. The meeting opened with pleasantries. Standard HR procedure reviews, recruitment, pipeline evaluations, metrics. But the tension beneath the surface crackled like dry ice. Then Nathan looked toward her. "Ms. Carter, I believe you have something to share." Lena stood. Calmly, she walked to the display terminal, plugged in the USB, and waited as the screen lit up behind her. She didn't speak yet. She let the silence settle thick and anticipatory. Then she clicked to the first slide. An email internal timestamped from 7 months ago. The subject: source code merge, Q4, rollout. The sender: Lena Carter. The recipient: Seraphine Whitaker. This, Lena said, her voice, clear, controlled, was a version of a module I submitted while contracting remotely. For Stormpoint, what you're about to see is the edit log from the master branch accessed from Seraphine's credentials. The timestamps match the content, nearly identical. She advanced the slide code comparisons, highlighted line. The room leaned forward. Next, she said, switching to a screenshot, is a calendar invite. It contains an internal pitch session for a project labeled Etherlink, a name I coined in 2021. Here's my draft document attached to that pitch. Here is the version that was presented to the executive team, stripped of my authorship. A soft gasp from one of the HR leads. Slide after slide. Lena walked them through every stolen project, every edited email, every subtle deletion and rebranding that scrubbed her out of the narrative. Then came the metadata. Login logs, IP addresses, workstation locations, all tracing back to Seraphine. And finally, Lena opened a folder titled Interview Day. She played the video. The board watched in silence as the footage showed Lena walking into the room. Seraphine didn't look up. Greg. The hiring manager glanced at her, then glanced away. The camera caught Seraphine picking up a red pen, writing something, then sliding the folder across to Greg. The word unqualified bled into the frame like a wound. Greg took the folder, and without looking at Lena, tore the first page in half. The video ended. Lena turned away from the screen and faced the room. No one spoke. Then the head of HR, Marilyn Dorsey, a woman with sharp features and a sharper mind, cleared her throat. Mr. Brannick, I recommend we initiate an independent investigation immediately. This is beyond internal protocol. This is potential fraud, misrepresentation, and targeted exclusion. Nathan nodded once. Make it happen. For the first time, Seraphine spoke. Her voice trembled around the edges, but she still tried to lace it with authority. This is taken out of context. You know how fast-paced development cycles can get. Things get messy, lines blur. Lena met her gaze. You didn't blur a line, Seraphine. You erased a name. Seraphine opened her mouth, but no defense came. Only the low hum of the air conditioner filled the room. The meeting adjourned with a kind of silent explosion. Executives stood in awkward clusters, murmuring quietly. Lena turned to gather her satchel. As she walked toward the door, a soft voice stopped her. Ms. Carter. It was Franklin Hale, the oldest board member. He had said nothing the entire meeting. He stood slowly, cane in hand, and looked her dead in the eye. You just reminded us what leadership actually looks like. Lena inclined her head slightly. Thank you, sir. Behind her, Seraphine remained seated, face pale, jaw tight, her hand still clutching the cold handle of her now empty coffee cup. As Lena stepped out into the hallway, the door clicked shut behind her like the final punctuation on a sentence. And for the first time in 7 years, she walked with her back straight, her steps steady, and the feeling that the truth had finally, undeniably, taken up space. Not just in the room they hadn't wanted her in, but in the story they never wanted her to tell. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds of Lena Carter's modest apartment, catching on the edge of her laptop screen just as the notification popped up. Her breath caught when she read the subject line. Offer of full-time, lead strategy role, pending your acceptance. For a moment, she didn't move. The cursor blinked on the screen like it was daring her to feel something, joy, victory, relief. But Lena just stared, quiet, steady. The position had once been Seraphine's. Now it had her name on it. She exhaled slowly and clicked to open the offer letter. She read every word twice, then again as if to etch it into her spine. Then she closed the lid of her laptop, not out of dismissal, but resolve. She showed up to Storm Point headquarters an hour earlier than required. That day, HR had already prepared a welcome tour, but Lena politely declined. Instead, she requested to be assigned to the product floor, not the executive glass corner suite she was entitled to. That room isolates impact, she told the stunned operations assistant. I want to be where things are built. Within a week, she had set up her workspace amid the system engineers and infrastructure planners. Her desk had no nameplate, no framed accolades, just sticky notes scribbled with names of coders and UX testers and a stack of used coffee mugs she refused to let anyone else clean. It wasn't about humility, it was about truth. She didn't care to rise above anyone. She wanted to rise with them. But not everyone took her silence as strength. That Friday evening, her phone vibrated just as she was preparing to leave the office. A voicemail from her mother, long and breathless. "Lena, I heard. I don't even know what to say. You know she's your sister, right, Seraphine? She's always taken things hard. You didn't have to embarrass her like that. Couldn't you have handled it differently? You know how this looks to the family." Lena didn't listen to the rest. Her hands didn't tremble, but her jaw tightened. A second message arrived, this time via email. No greeting, no pleasantries, just, "Enjoy your little spotlight. We both know how fragile attention is." Seraphine didn't shout. She never had to. Her attacks were cleaner, colder, surgical, and now Lena had a choice to make. Say everything or say nothing. She went home, lit a candle on the windowsill, and pulled out an old photo album from beneath her bed. Page after page of curated smiles. Graduations, birthdays, holidays, and she wasn't in most of them. When she was at the edge. Cropped, shadowed, misnamed in captions, forgotten. She flipped to a photo of a backyard barbecue, her 12th birthday. Seraphine in the center, holding a trophy from her piano recital. Lena off to the side, holding the matchbox she'd used to light the candles. Unseen, uncelebrated. She set the photo down. Her fingers curled around the edge of her desk, then relaxed. That night she opened her laptop and logged into her blog. It had lain dormant for years, a forgotten relic of her early coding days. She updated the header image, cleared the drafts, and wrote, "To anyone who's ever been told their diaos are too quiet to lead, maybe they were just too dignified to beg." It was a short post. No names, no details, just the weight of truth carried in few lines. By morning, it had been reposted over 6,000 times. By noon, several tech blogs picked it up. Then came the comments from women, from engineers, from former interns and leaders alike. Each one echoing, amplifying. Her inbox flooded journalists, podcasters, developers, even a few senior VPs from other firms who had watched her interview video when it was quietly leaked. And then came the invite. Women who build innovation. Identity and integrity keynote speaker. Invite Chicago. Lena stared at the screen. She hadn't applied. Hadn't asked. She hadn't needed to. Before logging off for the day, Lena stood from her desk and walked to the whiteboard wall that separated the open workspace from the lounge area. Dozens of sticky notes, diagrams, and wireframes covered it. She found a small open space, uncapped a marker, and wrote, "I didn't fight to be loud. I fought to be heard." No one said anything, but the room grew quiet as others read the words. She didn't turn to see who was watching. She didn't need to. She picked up her bag, slung it over her shoulder, and walked out with steady steps. For the first time in years, she wasn't shrinking, hiding, or waiting for permission. She simply was, and it was enough. The morning sunlight spilled softly through the window blinds, casting golden streaks across the hardwood floor. Lena sat quietly by the window, a warm cup of coffee cupped between her palms. Her inbox was quiet. No HR notifications, no press inquiries, no sudden meetings. Just one message blinking gently on her lock screen. Please. A single word. Was it an apology, a manipulation in disguise? Lena couldn't tell. But what she did know was this: she was no longer the one being asked to explain. Now she was the one asking the question. In the span of a year, Lena had gone from being erased to becoming something of a symbol. Her writing had found its way into corporate onboarding manuals. Her blog was studied in women's leadership seminars. She was invited to speak on panels, her words quoted in thought pieces. People used to forget her name, now they started conversations with. "I read something you wrote once, and it stayed with me." Family members who once labeled her the quiet one, or worse, the ungrateful one, had slowly begun to resurface. Some came with carefully chosen apologies. Others pretended nothing ever happened. Slipping into her inbox with awkward warmth, she listened. She noted, but she didn't forget. Only one person had never reached out until today. Lena called back. The line picked up faster than she expected. Seraphine's voice, once sharp and commanding, was rough, quieter than Lena remembered. "Do you hate me?" Seraphine asked. Lena didn't answer. "I know you probably do," she continued. "But I've been seeing someone, a therapist. I didn't understand how afraid I was until now. Afraid of not being seen, afraid of losing who I thought I was in the family." There was a pause, long and hollow. "Do you think we could start over?" Lena sat still. She could hear the traffic outside her apartment, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. The silence between them felt like a wound that hadn't scabbed. She didn't speak. Not because she didn't have words, but because some answers are too complex for language. Instead, she turned her gaze to a framed photo on the shelf, a family picture. Everyone smiling, dressed perfectly for the occasion. Lena's face was cut off just barely by the edge of the frame. Cropped out like she never fully belonged. No tears came, no anger either, just a heavy, familiar quiet. She opened her laptop, logged into her blog, and typed a single line. To the quiet one at the table. "You were never invisible. They just feared what would happen if you spoke." She hit publish, no tags, no hashtags, no names. Just true. That night, Lena walked into a small bakery tucked away on a quiet corner of the city. The lights were warm. The air smelled like vanilla and patience. She pointed to a plain white cake in the display. "No writing, no decorations. Just that one, please." The clerk nodded without question. Lena took the cake home, placed it on her kitchen table. She cut a slice, brought it to her balcony, and sat with it beneath the soft hum of the city. No party, no candles, no toasts. Just her honoring the woman who had returned to her own story and taken the pen back. The cake was subtly sweet, not too rich. But it tasted like victory. Not the loud kind with spotlights and applause, but the private, powerful kind that sinks deep into your bones. She sat still, breathing in the night, letting herself take up space in the silence. Not shrinking, not asking permission. And in that moment, as the last bite disappeared and the wind stirred the edge of her sleeve, a thought rose clear and steady. Not every storm comes to destroy. Some come to clear the path, and this time, I was the storm. Lena's story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming voice, identity, and truth in a world that tried to silence her. From being erased in her own family to becoming a leader who doesn't need a spotlight to be seen. Her journey reminds us you don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be heard. This story is a powerful reminder that healing doesn't always come with closure, and strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and unshakable. Lesson learned: speak your truth. Even if your voice trembles, lead even when no one claps, and never let someone else hold the pen to your story. If this message moved you, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to follow more stories that empower and inspire. Let's keep rewriting the narratives together.